Welcome back to episode number 3 of the On the Grid podcast. I have a very special guest with us today. I have Ben Seymour, and if you don't mind, please introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dewey. Or Dowie. That's how it's pronounced, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, that's news to me. But yeah, my name's Ben. I'm a graphic designer of 8 years. I work in the esports industry as well as the pharmaceutical industry. In esports, I do apparel design for Andbox, New York Subliners, New York Excelsior, and I also do graphic design for Rectify Gaming. And then in the pharmaceutical industry, which is my full-time job, I work for AstraZeneca as a social media graphic designer.
Wicked. Let's get straight into it. All right, thanks for that, Ben. So first thing I want to ask you is kind of a most generic question, but is designing something you did before the esports scene? Have you always had an interest in it?
Well, I'm going to combine esports with gaming. I think they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And it's a yes and no from me. It's kind of complicated. So I started, gaming and trying to be involved in like teams early on, way before I started designing. Designing is something that I pursued in high school. It was like a recommended class to me, and I spent like a full year just doing graphic design in school. I had no relation with graphic design and esports at the time. I was just like, making YouTube videos of me like sniping or whatnot, trying to like join teams. And then eventually I found out that like you can join an esports team um, through graphic design. So I wanted to join an esports team, like preferably like FaZe or Sword or something back in the day.
Yeah.
And as a graphic designer, and then quit to be a sniper for their team. And then, eventually I just realized like I should just stick with graphic design because it's kind of ridiculous to do that in the first part. But yeah, it's a yes and no. I started out in esports, and then eventually it just all came together, I guess you can say.
Okay, so I think that's really cool. So like you tried joining teams like sniping or
Yeah,
like
yeah,
trick
yeah.
shotting or what?
I was a sniper, and I was pretty bad. I was awful. But when you're like a young kid sniping, if you hit like a couple quick scopes in a row, you think like you're a god. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I deserve to be in FaZe. Look at me go. But
Like
oh,
if I can adapt, get out the way. Like phase
I
rain.
remember I was doing a like a montage challenge for a Pomage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't win. I didn't even come in like third place. And I commented on like his like tweet or something. I was like, "Hey, I should have won. Here's my video."
Oh no.
And I was in like
Oh
seventh grade
no.
or something. And everyone came to my video and they either thought I was trolling or they thought I was just like terrible. I had like 400 dislikes and only like 3 likes on it. I had all these people like commenting to quit. And that's when I kind of knew I'm like, maybe I am not good. It
Jesus,
was it
man.
was insane.
So wait,
I'm not even kidding. It was
how
crazy.
how old is seventh grade? How old are you?
I was like 13 years old.
Jesus, man, you must have had some pretty thick skin at
I took it
13.
like a champ though.
Yeah, I mean, I would have probably cried in a corner. What the fuck? Like,
I was like, I'm not a sniper, man. I gotta switch it up. So I just, I still play video games from time to time now, with my friends. Just chilling, not trying to join FaZe. But design is where I'm competitive now.
yeah, goalposts have moved, huh?
Yeah,
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 that's fair. So when it comes to like your design aspect, you said it was recommended to you in high school.
yeah.
Which I don't know how it works in America, like how old you are when you're in high school. But how come it was like recommended? Like, what does that mean and entail?
So, in high school is when you're in between the ages of 14 and 18.
Okay.
So like by the time you're 18, you graduate high school and then you go on to college. I think college for or high school for America is college for people in the UK.
Similar. Like you can leave school here when you're 16 and go to college.
Yeah, you can leave school when you're 16 in America as well, but it's pretty rare. I don't know a lot of people that have, but
Hmm.
it was recommended to me because I took this class in my freshman year of high school, which is your first year, that was called mechanical drawing. In my high school, you had like a bunch of like different paths you could take, and usually people that take mechanical drawing are recommended to take graphic design because they're fairly similar.
Yeah.
Um, so I was recommended just because I chose to take that class.
Okay, that's pretty good. I mean, your high school, I could be completely wrong, but from what it sounds like is that they knew their pupils quite well. They gave you a lot of options as to what to
Oh
do.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. I'm really glad I got introduced to graphic design in high school because if I didn't take it in high school, I don't know if I would ever be introduced to graphic design. You know,
Jesus.
it,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy to think about because I had no interest in graphic design. When they recommended graphic design, I was like, oh, I don't want to take graphic design. That sounds boring, you know?
Yeah.
But look at me now.
Yeah, it changes a bit, doesn't it? Your perspective on
Oh
it after
yeah.
a while. That actually leads to the second question, which was, do you have any like classical training like within school? Which you clearly that's how you got
Hmm.
introduced to graphics. But would you say that you've learnt more
Yeah.
in school? Have you got to college, and where have you learnt more about graphics, or the most about graphics?
Right. So I'll just talk about like high school for now, real quick.
Hmm.
It was incredibly like informal. You know, there wasn't anything like, oh, you have to like do these design guidelines to make this. It was kind of like just like, oh, make a movie poster, have fun, and like if you did it, you would just get an A in the class, basically.
Nice.
You know, it was very hard to fail graphic design, which is actually like one of the reasons why I was like kind of like interested in taking it because it was an easy
Yeah.
A. But you know, it caught my interest eventually. Like I started getting involved in designing outside of school. Um, when I was like 16 or something, right? So
Hmm.
I decided to take graphic design in college and major, and I actually majored in art direction,
Oh,
and that's
nice.
where I started learning a lot more. Temple University representing, but yeah, I learned a lot more discipline in college. You know, everything was a lot more professional and was kind of like getting me ready to like actually get a job.
Hmm.
Whereas in high school, it was like kind of just like introducing it to you, felt like. But I would say like the number one thing I learned in college was completely unrelated to graphic design. It can be applied to every single person, which is just accountability. I think that's like the number one lesson that you learn when you're in college because you have to meet deadlines no matter what. And when you go into the real world when you're working, if you miss a deadline, that's no bueno. So that's sort of like the stuff that I learned, like just like professional discipline, accountability. But I would say I learned the most just through myself because unlike a lot of like you know other students that took graphic design courses, I designed outside of school. A lot of people that I went to school with just designed for school. They had no part of it outside of it,
Hmm.
right? So I was experimenting on my own, you know, through client projects, through this whole esports adventure, I guess you could call it,
Yeah, yeah.
and just taking the time to myself to like, you know, if I wanted to learn something, I'd like look more into it, practice it more, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And do you reckon that with the more, I guess, professional teaching that they gave you within college,
Hmm.
and then you also said you were designing within esports, is that around the time like Awaken happened? Is that around?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's around the time Awaken happened.
Yeah, and we briefly know each other from Awaken Militia, which is pretty
Hmm.
cool. So around that time, you kind of had both worlds, I guess. You had the more, I guess, classical teaching within college. You
Hmm.
had like the esports community. So how did both of those environments, which could be similar or different, shape your design philosophy and your thinking about design?
Right. So, you know, just from school, professional disciplines and whatnot, that kind of like made me like it's kind of weird in a design perspective as a designer, you know, whether you're in school or in esports,
Hmm.
you kind of have like different mindsets, right? When you're in esports, it's kind of like, oh, I have to be so good at everything. I got to be perfect when it comes to like making Fortnite banners. You know, it's crazy. Like people in esports are so talented, but like when you're in school, it's kind of like, oh, I just need to know how to do this, and I'll be good. You know, like
Right.
if like I learned how to make a logo properly in school, like all of like the rules in that, and I'm like, all right, I know how to make a logo, so like I will be a good logo designer. But like
Hmm.
in esports, it's kind of like, uh, I need to get like 200 likes on this, or I'm not a good logo designer. You know, it's kind of crazy. Or like I need a George Nowak to like this tweet, or I'm not good. You know,
So would you say that
it's crazy. There's
esports? Sorry,
yeah,
carry on.
yeah. There's like a lot of there's a huge aspect of notoriety in
Hmm.
esports that like you need to have. You know, I'll just for example, like I'm in New York Sublearners, I have it in my name, so I have like that notoriety.
Hmm.
But if I remember when I didn't have NYSL in my name, I was like, a lot of things weren't like justified for me, like my craft, my prices, and whatnot. But now it's like it's so weird. It's so different. Just being involved in the spaces that you are in esports. It's so complicated, and the real world through schooling, you get your degree, everyone's on the same level. But like when you're in esports, it's like who have you worked with, who follows you, who interacts with you. It's crazy. It's the craziest thing.
It's a lot of validation, it seems, right?
Yeah,
And do you
yeah.
feel like that then, when with like notoriety and validation, means that it kind of not peer pressures, but almost forces you to do certain things in a certain way? Or do you feel like you can be completely your own person and follow your own path with design and it be just as valid?
I'd say like it goes hand in hand. I'd say like the peer pressure aspect of like being a part of like a big organization or being a part of like a big group of like designers, you know, that is very prominent. But I do think people that disassociate with that sort of mindset are still like incredibly, um, you know, I guess you could say notorious because we're just talking about notoriety. Like, just for example, like I'm sure you know Pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like kind of involved with esports. He's done stuff for like Team Liquid and stuff, but like he's in no team now. He's doing like his own thing with uh, over at like Scuffed, I think it is. And like he's the man. Everyone knows he's like a legend, right?
Hmm.
But he has like no affiliations with anything in esports, but everyone in esports know him and love him.
Mm.
Another person that comes to mind, my good friend Felipe.
Yeah.
He does like branding and whatnot, and everyone knows he's like one of the best people that makes logos, but he has no affiliation with any um, you know, big teams, big people. So I think the number one thing is if you don't want to like fall into that peer pressure subgroup, you just have to, you know, be determined, stay consistent, and like just show that you know what you're doing, and you'll get recognized through that. But
Yeah.
you know, joining a big team will just automatically put you in the spotlight. You
And
know, kind of like throw you in there.
yeah. And do you feel that now you have NYSL in your name, like you mentioned it, like you
Mhm.
have that sort of almost validation. Do you feel better for it, or do you feel like you are just the same person as if you didn't have that in your name?
Honestly, I feel pretty different. When I first joined NYSL, a lot of big designers that like haven't followed me. A lot of clients that were in my DMs like a couple months ago saying like, "Oh, your prices are too high," came back to me and talked
No
about my
way.
prices. It's incredible. It's so crazy, but like as like just like me as a designer, I mean, of course, over time your skills get better, but I'm the same. You know, since I joined NYSL, it's just like it's so crazy to think like how much validation you get for putting some letters in front of your name that represent a big team. Um, it's crazy. It is crazy.
That is mad. And just moving on a little bit now, you said that you right at the top of the show you said, "Oh yeah, I do apparel design for NYSL." You also do a
Mhm.
lot of like social media graphics for AstraZeneca, and I've seen you do like a lot of Twitch work as well. Is there any aspect of design that you want to specialize in, or are you happy being a jack of all trades? Like, what is your philosophy, but viewpoint on that?
I'd say like I like being a jack of all trades.
Hmm.
I also want to expand into other sorry, I want to expand into other concentrations like motion design and 3D work. I always talk about it. I never put it into motion, but AstraZeneca actually is going to have me start doing some motion graphics. So I got to learn motion or I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah, you have
So
no choice.
that's a yeah, that's a definite thing for my future. But I'd say like I like to be a jack of all trades, but I also like to specialize in stuff. And the one thing that I want to specialize in is apparel design. I
Mm.
think it's like the most fun thing for me. I love just like the whole process of making apparel and then getting it produced and like seeing people wear it. I think that's like the coolest thing. So I obviously want to stay, being specialized in apparel design, but
Yeah.
I also want to be a jack of all trades where people can come to me for like pretty much anything. I did do like some social media work for NYSL. So, I just like to have that like opportunity to work on all sorts of projects. And I have found it that like if I'm working like I remember 1 month I had nothing but apparel projects, right? Whether it was from Andbox or if it was through like freelance. And I kind of got tired of it. I was like, I need to like make a header, man. I need to do an ad. I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
So I like that you can like switch it up and like have a completely different workflow on different projects.
That's cool. And if you don't mind, we'll talk about that in a little bit more depth. But first of all, I just got to thank our sponsors. Are you a creative that spends long hours at your desk sketching and conceiving of new ideas? Do you maybe like to play some video games in your downtime, or maybe even enjoy some exercise as your creative escape as part of a healthy lifestyle? If any of these are true for you, then you'll more than likely feel like the fuel tank is empty and that sometimes you just need some more energy to be on top of your game. Fortunately, the partners of the podcast over at XGamer can help you out. The energy drink is filled with vitamins and minerals with zero added sugar and a low calorie intake, meaning for a boost in energy, focus, and stamina, meaning you can have peak creativity for longer. Unlike traditional sugar-filled energy drinks, XGamer offers no crash experience. Simply add 1 scoop to water, shake, and you're away. XGamer is also vegan suitable and offers other products which you can find on their website. Get a 10% discount site-wide using the code GRID at checkout over at xgamer.com. That's code GRID, GRID, all in capitals, at x-gamer.com. All right, welcome back. And Ben, we're just going to continue on swiftly. And with apparel design, you said you get a bit tiring, so you like having all the tools in your toolbox to just whip out and do whatever you want to do, which is obviously really cool and you're really talented for doing it. But what about apparel design, besides the process, that really draws you to it?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, just seeing people wear it,
Mm-hmm.
is like incredible to see. I can wear it. My huge philosophy when designing apparel, first question that comes to mind, would I wear this? And that's
Mm-hmm.
like one of like the number one things I see in esports, like all of these teams dropping their apparel line. It's like I don't think anyone would want to wear that unless you're like a super fan of that team.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of crazy. Like a lot of apparel like sucks in the esports industry. I'm like, I want to change that. I want to be like, yo, I would wear this to like a party. Like, would you wear this like in front of like your girlfriend sort of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but other than that, I'd say another cool aspect about apparel is that people like actually have to buy it, whereas other concentrations of designs, like if you post a header or something, or like you make a ad and like your team posts that ad, those just gets likes and retweets. Apparel gets sales.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like so cool to me that some of my apparel like sold out for subliners and Excelsior. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of my Excelsior hoodies sold out in like 12 hours. And that's just
Jeez.
insane to think about.
Congratulations.
That beats any amount of like retweets in my book.
Yeah, congratulations. That's awesome. That's
Thank you.
incredible. Yeah, so being able to wear it is like really important. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, is there a criteria then for what makes something wearable? Like, what's your thought process?
I'd say the biggest thing is trends, you know. There's like some things that like obviously make a t-shirt bad, you know, like if it's like the logo's too big and like it's like kind of weird to think about. I'm doing apparel work for esports, but you can't make it look too gamery, if that makes sense. There's like a
Hmm.
huge like gamer look in the esports world that like a lot of apparel is made under, and it just doesn't fly with me, and it doesn't fly with like a lot of people. You look at other orgs like Phase and 100 Thieves, and they make incredible apparel. They have great collaborations, and they look nothing like a gamer would like wear this. They don't look like, oh yeah, I'm gonna wear this to like a LAN event or something and play like Call of Duty for 20 hours straight. They just look like, yeah, I'm a regular dude. Like, I'll go to the grocery store today. I'll wear this to the grocery store, wear this out to dinner, sort of thing. Um, so it's like it's weird. Like, I'd say what makes apparel good is just trends.
Hmm.
And you have to be on top of that. You can't make something that was a trend like 4 years ago, or else it would be bad. You
Yeah.
know?
Okay. So with trends being so proficient within apparel design, do you think that trends are also important to follow outside of apparel and more like within social media or branding? Spoke with Joran about this last week on the podcast, and he kind
Hmm.
of had an opinion on it. I just want to hear yours.
Yeah, I'd say trends are important to follow, and social media and whatnot. But I'd say like the cherry on top would be to find your own sort of thing. You know,
Hmm.
we've seen a lot of orgs like amateur teams copy other orgs, especially like 100 Thieves. A lot of teams copy their look, and um, it's not necessarily like a bad thing, because at least these orgs are kind of like competent in the fact that like they know what looks good and what's successful. But it is important to put your own twist on the things, and that's something that I think all orgs and individuals and designers should value, just to be unique. Obviously trends are trends. um, they're all kind of gonna come together. There's no such thing as like something truly original,
Okay.
but you know everything is kind of like stolen. Someone already has done an aspect of what you're about to make.
Mm-hmm.
So, just try to put your own twist onto it. Like, just looking at your brand, you do like the Swiss style, and that's
Yeah.
great, but you put your own twist onto it. And that's something I think is like really important, because like there's other individuals like George, he does the Swiss style too, but
Yeah.
he has his own sort of style to it too.
Mm-hmm.
So just put your own twist onto things. It's cool to follow trends. Just try to make it as unique as possible. Try to make it as you as possible.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think you've summed up really nicely there. Like you
Yeah.
can tell like what's competent. Yoran touched on this too. Like that you could with some amateurs, you could probably like take 5 graphics, switch a logo, and you wouldn't know which
Yeah.
one belongs to which. Yeah, but like to be
Hmm.
originals, pretty seems to be an important factor between like designers I have on the podcast, which is really good to anyone watching who is maybe a younger designer, doesn't really know what to do yet in terms of follow trends or not. But yeah, thank you for that answer.
Right.
Thank
Hmm.
you. So when you're working with New York, then what's the culture like there? Is it very like trend orientated? Does it follow like typical esports culture, whatever that is? If you have your own version of that, like what's it like?
I mean, it is very esportsy over there, and I like that. That's why I work in esports. It's
Mhm.
I love the esports culture. I'd say like I'll define the esports culture, and I'll talk about NYSL and like
Yeah,
working with them.
that'd be cool.
So the esports culture to me is like any other industry, but incredibly social, incredibly, laid back, not strict, not highly regulated. And then, like I said, completely like incredibly social. There's so many like sub communities. We got us, the designers, we got the video editors, we got the content creators, we got the, you know, professionals. It's crazy, and we all come together, and it's just like it feels so much deeper than like what any other industry could be like. Like I'm in the pharmaceutical industry, and I don't know any other pharmaceutical designers except the people that work on my team, you know.
Yeah.
But um you know, in esports, I know like 1,000 designers, and I've interacted with all of them, you know, and I think that's so cool how social we are as a community. But then moving on to, you know, my work with NYSL, um, you know, speaking about how social and laid back this whole ecosystem is, uh, New York Subliners and all of the other Call of Duty League teams at one point were extremely regulated by the CDL.
Mhm.
And this year they have branched off and we're giving more freedom creatively.
That's
So I
good.
think that's like a huge adjustment that all CDL teams are making. You know, just through like design, I get a lot more freedom than I would have last year during Modern Warfare series. Just because I don't blame the CDL for, you know, being highly regulated with their teams and like how they, you know, post creative work, how their jerseys and merch look.
Mhm.
But you know, I'd say now it's going into a much better direction with all the creative freedom we're getting. But
Yeah.
it's great working over there. Um, you know, all the projects I work on are cool. The process that I work on is like perfect how I would like prefer to work on like apparel projects. So yeah, everything's great.
That's cool. It sounds like this year seems to be a bit more of an adjustment stage, but going towards a better direction for CDL. And
Oh
I
yeah, definitely.
understand, like last year, there was a lot of uproar about like the merch and stuff being sold
Yes.
strictly through I guess Call of Duty, and it was kind of like, yeah, there's no creativity here. So does that mean that we'll be seeing, more unique jerseys and stuff in future? I mean, we're starting to see it this year. Is that what it
Yeah.
means?
Yeah, I would assume so. I don't know too much about that. I know like as far as apparel go, you get like full freedom on everything. Like I can just talk about my process real quick as far as like what my projects were.
Hmm.
They literally were like, "Yo, Ben, we need a hoodie, we need two t-shirts, we need a pair of joggers, we need a long sleeve shirt, and we need a hat." And that's it. That's the only direction that they gave me. Everything else I just did. And they're like, all right, this is cool. You know, maybe like change this text to say this or whatever. But none of the changes were big. So all of the creativity was like in my hands essentially, which is great. It's like the perfect thing. But I'm sure with jerseys it'd be different because we saw from jerseys this season they're all pretty similar, but they're not as similar as they were last year.
Hmm.
There's still a little bit more creative freedom, but they had to follow you know, guidelines like
Okay.
where the graphics can go. I'm sure like how big the logos can be and whatnot. But it is getting a lot better.
Okay, that's good. And can I just ask a bit more about like your creative freedom that you have with New York? Are you someone who prefers to have complete creative freedom, or do you like having guidance, or what's kind of the balance that you like to have?
I like to at least start out with complete creative freedom, right?
Hmm.
If they're not feeling what I made, like if they really disliked it for whatever reason, I would prefer like at that point for them to give me like full guidance on like what their vision is. But you know, through my processes, they entrust me with my vision. And I think it's kind of like a they mentioned to me like after my first project, I said like before I was even on the team, I was like, am I gonna, you know, be working on any other projects? And they said it depends on output. So my first drop, the New York Subliners drop, did well. A lot of the pieces sold out, and that's the output that they're looking for. So they're like, all right, this guy made this without any guidance. We're gonna like throw another project at him without any guidance, and then see how that goes. And then you know the Excelsior one did even better. So I love the creative freedom that I get, but there are instances where I would work on something and they would be like, "Oh, we don't really like this like at all." um, and they would just like tell me like specifically like what they were looking for, and I would prefer that 100%.
Yeah, that's good. So they direct when they need to be and give you
Yeah.
freedom. Ah, that's good. And but when you have like that sort of pressure on you, like you need to perform to get more projects, that's a lot of pressure, man. Like fair dues.
I
Fair dues.
mean, hey, the good news is about working with these big teams, especially in apparel, is you can put a logo on a t-shirt and it will sell, you know. So I'm pretty confident that things will perform. It's just I kind of set a bar for myself with things selling out. But I'm happy with that because all of that is through my creative freedom. So I'm only going to get better as a designer. So, you know, I'm sure like if something doesn't sell out, they're going to be like, Ben, you're off the team. I'm sure that won't happen, but, um, you know, I'm sure like I'm very passionate about apparel. I love making apparel. So I don't really see anything that I make do bad, you know, necessarily.
Yeah.
So I'm not pressured at all. And like I said, I work full time at AstraZeneca. You know, that's like my main priority. So whatever happens, you know, cross my fingers, knock on wood, I still got that.
Let's talk about AstraZeneca just a little bit. So, can you tell me about how that job came to be, what it's like working in a pharmaceutical? You know, how different is it?
Oh, it's completely different. You know, starting out with how I got the job is probably one of the craziest stories of all time. I was struggling a lot trying to find, you know, a full-time job outside of out of college. Um, I was getting denied. Like I probably got denied like over 300 jobs that I applied to.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, yeah, the pandemic was not a
Mm.
great thing for me. Um, you know, job searching wise, and I kind of gave up on job searching around like February, March, and I um had to get my LLC and you know pursue freelance design full time. And I was like completely set on that. I was like, I'm not applying to jobs anymore until you know the job market's better.
And
And
was
then
this,
randomly, what's
sorry,
that?
was this February of this year or February of last year?
February of this year.
Cool. All right, so recently then, like it's a
Yeah,
struggle for a year.
yeah. I
Damn.
struggled for almost a year out of college, which is crazy. But I got my LLC to do freelance full time legitimately, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna like scrape by doing freelance full time.
Hmm.
Um, but randomly, like in March, I got a message on LinkedIn from a recruiter, and he was like, "Hey, AstraZeneca is hiring for a graphic designer. I think you can fit the role well. Do you want me to set up an interview for you?" And I was like, "Okay." And I wasn't thinking anything of it. I was like,
Damn.
"I'm probably going to get denied, but might as well go to an interview."
Yeah.
I went to the interview, and then that went well. And was like, "Hey, we're gonna put you on to the second and final interview." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll do that." I was just thinking like I'm not gonna get hired. I'm not gonna get hired. Um, and then my second interview happened, and they're like, "All right, we'll let you know." And I was like, "Okay, thanks." And I'm just like sitting there like I'm not gonna get this job. I got to get back to freelancing. And then 1 week later, I got a call from the recruiter, and they're like, "Yeah, they want to hire you. Blah blah blah. This is your salary. This is your benefits." And I'm like, "Oh my god, what is happening?" Um,
Damn, brother.
it's insane. It's the most random thing because like right when I gave up, I got an opportunity. Um, so you never know what's gonna happen, really.
No,
Um, it's crazy, but
that's
working with
awesome.
AstraZeneca has been great so far. Working in the pharmaceutical industry, it's highly regulated. A lot of my projects are kind of like, you know, boring. Most of my projects right now is just like changing the word 2020 to 2021 for regulation reasons
Yep.
on their past like labels and whatnot. Um, so that's sort of what I'm doing, but it's great. It's
Yeah.
great.
I guess with working with pharmaceuticals, it can be quite repetitive,
Yeah,
and quite tedious because like it has to go through, like you try to be creative, it goes through global, goes through legal, goes through
Yep.
this, and that, comes back, and then it's like strip every bit of creativity out and just change the
Yep.
words, and it's like,
It's a learning
yeah.
experience for sure. I remember one of the things that I did, which was a big no-no. I had someone smiling in an ad that I made for
Mm,
them, and they were like, "You can't have someone smiling because that makes the customer um, think that this 100% works. This is just an assumption that this drug will work. When if it doesn't, they have the right to sue us." And it's like, all right, I can't have someone smiling in an ad.
Jesus Christ.
So it's crazy. It is crazy. There's a
That
lot
is
of
strict.
regulation.
That's strict as hell. So yeah, so do you
Yeah.
feel like that's really different from like esports in terms of creativity wise?
100%. It's completely different from esports. You can get away with pretty much anything in esports, really, unless it's like, terrible.
Yeah.
But in pharmaceuticals, it's a whole different world. But I'm glad I'm getting that, and I'm glad I'm getting that experience.
Yeah. Do you feel yourself wanting to continue working within pharmaceuticals like afterwards? Is that something that you'd want to do for like the rest of your career, or is like apparel still something that keeps drawing you in?
Well, apparel is like my true passion. Um, I'd say right now, like, it's working in pharmaceuticals is great. It's getting me by. It's creative, like my main goal as far like after college was to get any sort of design job. I'd take anything. And
Mm.
pharmaceuticals is great. It's like one of like the top
Oh yeah,
industries to work in
it's
as far as
prestigious.
like, yeah, yeah, it's great. And like having that on my resume too will like grant me like pretty much like any job outside of pharmaceuticals because it's so hard to get in.
Hmm.
But I mean, I would be lying if I would say like, yeah, my dream is to work in pharmaceuticals for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
you
fair.
know, Unless they like drop like $50 million on me, I don't think I'll be staying with pharmaceuticals for the rest of my life. But like for the next few years, yeah, I'm gonna stay with AstraZeneca. They've been treating me well. The work has been going well, but it's not something I'm truly passionate about. First and foremost, I'm passionate about design. So happy I got that. That's like my biggest dream, really, is to just work full time in anything design. So
Hmm.
I'm incredibly thankful for that. But now I'm at a point where I'm like, eventually I can do my own thing, but I'm miles away from that.
Yeah, that's your ultimate goal, and it's a good goal to have.
Yeah.
That's kind of all we have time for today, Ben. So I just want to say thank you very much once again for coming onto the podcast. And is there anything in terms of advice or any last words you'd like to say to the audience?
I'd say just little advice is, from my story with AstraZeneca and how I got that job, it's just you never know what's going to happen. Same with New York Subliners. That was kind of random to me.
Hmm.
I applied for that not thinking of anything, and then here I am. I think I'm going on 3 months with them. So you really never know what's going to happen. So I'd say if you see an opportunity out there, shoot your shot, because they could get back to you. Um, Anything's possible, really, especially in graphic design, because, people can find your work more valuable than others.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Ben, once again. And thank you to everyone listening or watching. And we'll see you next week for the next episode of the On the Grid podcast. Peace.
It's hard to explain all the cell empathy of